Welcome to CSS Breakdown, book by book, where we delve into the pages of Norman Lowe's Mastering Modern British History, 4th edition, this time in Season 6, Episode 7, as we ask. Was Robert Peel a great statesman who reshaped the political and economic landscape of Britain, or did his actions ultimately destroy his own party? Today, we're taking a deep dive into the extraordinary and often contradictory legacy of Robert Peel. He's just one of those pivotal figures in 19th century British politics. And the central tension, the thing we really want you to think about, is this. Was he a visionary leader, modernizing Britain? Or, ironically, did he end up shattering the very party he worked so hard to build?
It's a brilliant paradox, isn't it? We should probably start by looking at his early career, seeing how he helped rebuild the old Tory party, which, well, laid the groundwork for the modern Conservatives.
Okay, let's start there. His background came from money, didn't he? Lancashire cotton manufacturer's son, got into Parliament incredibly young, just 21, back in 1809. What was it about those early years?
Well, he certainly made an impression fast. His knack for administration, it was noticed almost straight away. He was Chief Secretary for Ireland between 1812 and 1818.
Which was a really rough time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Lots of Catholic opposition to the Act of Union.
Exactly. Very volatile.
Yeah.
But Peel managed to sort of contain the unrest. He did it by setting up the Irish Constabulary.
So Ireland's first effective police force.
Pretty much, yeah. Ireland's first modern, organized police force showed he could bring order out of chaos.
So that reputation, the able and honest administrator, it started early. Then he becomes Home Secretary in 1822. And this is where things get really interesting, I think. Penal code reform, the Metropolitan Police.
Yes. The Bobbies, or
Draft.
Peelers as they were nicknamed.
Right. What was so, groundbreaking about creating the Met? What does it tell us about him?
Well, these weren't just small changes. The penal code stuff streamlined a really harsh system, but the police, before Peel, there wasn't a proper organized professional police force in London. His idea wasn't just about catching criminals after the fact.
More about prevention.
Exactly. An impartial, visible presence to deter crime. Pragmatic, but quite radical for its time, became a real hallmark of his approach.
Okay, so fast forward a bit. The Whigs are in power for most of the 1830s. Peel then focuses on building up this new conservative party. How did he go about that? What was his kind of core contribution?
I think his biggest contribution was giving the party a whole new image. And the key document there is the Tamworth Manifesto, December 1834.
Right, I've heard of that. What did it actually say?
It was basically a public declaration. He said, look, the Conservatives accept the 1832 Reform Act. It's a final and irrevocable settlement. This was huge. It moved the party away from just resisting change towards cautious reform.
So keeping the old institutions, monarchy, aristocracy, church, but fixing proved abuses, striking a balance.
Precisely. Preserve the core, but acknowledge things needed fixing. It was a very smart way to appeal to moderates, bring more people in.
Especially that rising middle class, manufacturers, businessmen, maybe feeling a bit left out by the Whigs.
That's exactly who he was targeting, rebranding the party as conservative, not just Tory. Now, Peel himself wasn't really into the day-to-day party management.
The nuts and bolts.
Yeah, that fell to others. People like F.R. Bonham, who did brilliant work organizing local associations, setting up the Carlton Club in London as a kind of HQ.
So Peel provided the vision, Bonham did the organizing.
Kind of. It was a team effort, but Peel set the direction. And it worked. They rapidly closed the gap on the Whigs.
Clearly, because June 1841, huge election victory. Majority of 76. But even here, there's debate, isn't there? Some historians, like Norman Gash, say he's the founder of the modern Conservative Party. Others point to Disraeli later on.
Yes, that's a classic historical debate. The counterargument is, well, look at who actually voted Conservative in 41. It was still mostly the traditional supporters, country gentry, Church of England folks.
So the name changed, the manifesto changed, but maybe the base hadn't fully shifted yet.
Arguably, yes. It suggests they weren't entirely new beyond the label. And this kind of sets up that fundamental tension in his career, building the party up only to, well, potentially break it later.
Okay, so he wins in 41, becomes prime minister, but he walks straight into an economic mess, right? Exports down, industry slumping, unemployment high, bad harvests pushing up bread prices.
And a £2 million deficit left by the Whigs.
Yeah.
It was a dire situation.
What did he do first? Where did he even start?
He acted very decisively. His main goal was to boost trade and help ordinary working families, and his big idea was moving towards free trade.
Right, he was influenced by the Manchester School, Cobden and Bright.
Heavily influenced. They argued that these protective tariffs, import duties, were just stifling British industry.
How so? Making raw materials too expensive.
That was part of it, yes. High costs for manufacturers. Plus, foreign countries didn't like British tariffs, so they put tariffs on British goods. And crucially, tariffs made food much more expensive for the poor.
So Peel thought, get rid of the tariffs.
And British goods become cheaper abroad, exports go up, industry gets a boost, more jobs are created, and the cost of living falls. He actually said, we must make this country a cheap country for living.
Sound like a clear strategy. And he went for it in his budgets, 1842, 1845.
Oh, absolutely. Sweeping changes. Duties removed completely on over 600 items, slashed on about 500 more. No export duties at all. No import duty on raw cotton, livestock, meat, potatoes. Pretty radical stuff.
Did it work? Was it the magic bullet he hoped for?
Well, the results were pretty dramatic. It really did lead to a trade revival. Exports increased, unemployment fell quite quickly, food got cheaper. Britain started moving out of the hungry 40s into what people call the golden age of Victorian prosperity.
Amazing. So his free trade gamble paid off. But what about that £2 million deficit? Tariffs bring in revenue. Cutting them must have hurt the government's income.
Ah, yes. That's where he made another bold and controversial move. He reintroduced income tax.
Income tax. That hadn't been around since the Napoleonic Wars, right? Abolished in 1816.
That's the one. 7 pence in the pound on incomes over £150 a year. It was meant to be temporary.
But it wasn't.
Nope. It proved so effective at raising money, it became permanent. So between the booming trade and the new income tax, he turned that Whig deficit into a healthy surplus pretty quickly.
Smart. Beyond trade and tax, he also tackled the financial system itself. The Bank Charter Act of 1844. What was the issue there?
The banking system was, frankly, a bit wild. Lots of different banks could issue their own banknotes, often far more than they could actually back up with gold reserves.
So when there was an economic slump,
The banks could collapse. People lost their savings. It caused chaos. Peel wanted to stabilize the currency, make it reliable.
how did the act do that?
Several key things. No new banks could issue notes. Existing banks had limits. And crucially, the Bank of England had to back any notes it issued over £14 million with actual gold.
Ah, so it tied the currency to gold reserves much more tightly.
Exactly. And over time, it phased out note issuing by other banks altogether. Gave the Bank of England control, made English currency incredibly stable, and really cemented London as the world's financial center.
Quite a legacy. He also looked at new companies. There must have been a lot of speculation going on.
There was. The Companies Act, also 1844, tried to stop reckless speculation. Before that, you could basically just put an ad in the paper and ask for money to start a company.
Seriously?
Pretty much. The act made it mandatory to register officially, publish a proper prospectus, keep regular accounts, a step towards transparency.
Did it work perfectly?
Well, its man weakness was that it didn't apply to railway companies, and that's where some of the really dodgy dealing was happening, the railway mania. But it was a start.
Okay, so impressive economic reforms. But what about social problems? We know about the terrible conditions in factories and the towns. What was Peel's thinking there?
His basic instinct really was that his economic policies would sort those things out eventually. Create jobs, give people more money to spend.
So free markets would lift everyone up.
That was the theory. He was also, politically, quite cautious about upsetting the middle-class businessmen who supported him. Didn't want to regulate working hours too much, for instance.
But things got pretty bad in 1842. High unemployment, Chartist violence. He had to do something, didn't he?
Yes, the pressure mounted,
Yeah.
especially from reformers like Lord Shaftesbury and the 10-Hour Movement. So the Mines Act of 1842 and a Factory Act in 1844 were passed under his government.
So he gets some credit.
Some. But really, most historians give the credit to Shaftesbury for pushing those through. Peel himself actually defeated Shaftesbury's attempt to get a 10-hour working day limit. And both acts, while steps forward, had significant weaknesses. Social reform just wasn't his main focus, it seems.
Right. Let's switch back to Ireland then. Always a problem, wasn't it? You mentioned it became critical again around 1843.
Yes, and it played a huge part in his downfall. Daniel O'Connell, the Irish leader, he'd had some limited success working with the Whigs, but now he started a big new campaign.
For repeal of the Act of Union. Breaking away from Britain.
That was the goal. He used mass meetings, agitation, the threat of civil war, Similar tactics to those he'd used successfully for Catholic emancipation earlier.
Holding these huge monster meetings. I read about one at Tara with maybe over 100,000 people. Must have been incredibly tense.
Absolutely. But Peel was determined not to give way this time. He didn't actually believe Ireland was on the brink of civil war. So when O'Connell planned another massive meeting at Clontarf in October 43,
Peel banned it.
and sent troops. O'Connell wasn't prepared to risk violence, so he called it off. Peel basically called his bluff and won.
And then O'Connell was arrested, tried for conspiracy?
Yes, quite dramatic. Found guilty, sentenced to a year, although the House of Lords later overturned it. But it kind of marked the end of O'Connell's peak influence. Younger, more radical groups like Young Ireland started taking over.
Did Peel try anything conciliatory alongside the firmness?
He did try. He appointed the Devon Commission to look into the whole land issue, which was a massive source of grievance. And he made a really significant gesture, increasing the government grant to Maynooth College.
That's the college that trained Catholic priests.
Yes. He bumped the grant up from £9,000 to £26,000 a year.
That must have gone down badly with his own Protestant supporters.
It caused a huge uproar, a real firestorm within the Conservative Party. The grant only passed Parliament because the Whigs voted for it. Shows you the divisions already appearing.
He also set up some universities.
3 non-sectarian university colleges, yeah. But the Catholic Church largely opposed them. Only the one in Belfast, mainly for Presbyterians, really took off. So these attempts at compromise, they just ended up dividing his own party more and didn't really touch the fundamental issue in Ireland, which was poverty. And then the potato blight hit.
The blight. July 1845. Suddenly, the Corn Law problem becomes desperately urgent. Can you just remind us what exactly were the Corn Laws? Why were they so hated?
Right. Introduced back in 1815. Essentially, they banned imported foreign corn unless the price of British-grown corn hit 80 shillings a quarter.
So guaranteeing high prices, high profits for British farmers and landowner.
Exactly. But critics said this kept bread prices artificially high, which was terrible for the poor, especially when harvests were bad or industry was depressed. Like in 1839, a loaf cost maybe 13 pence, when a weaver might only earn 5 shillings a week. It was brutal.
No wonder it led to the Anti-Corn Law League. What was their core argument?
Free trade, basically. They saw tariffs as an unnatural restraint. Get rid of the corn laws, they said, and bread would be cheaper. That means workers' real wages go up, they can buy more stuff, which stimulates British industry.
Makes sense. Any other arguments?
Yeah. They also argued it would force British farmers to become more efficient, more competitive. And if Britain bought more foreign corn, maybe those countries would buy more British manufactured goods. Better international relations, too. John Bright even called it a moral crusade.
Sounds pretty convincing. Who was arguing against repeal and why?
Well, the landowners, obviously. And newspapers like The Times, they argued repeal would ruin British farming, cause mass unemployment in the countryside. They also raised the fear of depending on foreign food supplies, especially in wartime.
The national security argument.
Right. And they threw this accusation at the League that it was just a selfish, middle-class capitalist plot to lower wages, because if bread was cheaper, employers could pay workers less.
Did anyone buy that?
Surprisingly, some industrial workers did. It made the Chartists, who were fighting for the vote, quite suspicious of the League.
Interesting dynamic. How did the League push their case? They seem very organized.
Incredibly organized. They used mass propaganda, their own newspaper, millions of leaflets sent via the New Penny Post, huge meetings, indoor and outdoor. They built the Free Trade Hall in Manchester, held 8,000 people, agents all over the country. And they were amazing fundraisers. £50,000 in 1843, £100,000 in 1844. Huge money then. Plus, they got Daniel O'Connell on side, so Irish workers often helped out. Even acted as bodyguards against Chartists trying to disrupt meetings.
Smart politics. And they didn't just rely on petitions, did they? They focused on Parliament itself.
Exactly. Learned from the Chartists, perhaps. They used their funds to help supporters buy property, those 40-shilling freeholds, specifically to get them the vote.
Clever. Did it work?
It did. By 1841, they had 8 MPs, including Cobden. By 12. Not a huge number, but as Cobden said, it gave them a loud voice in Parliament.
So how did Peel himself come around to repeal? I mean, his party was elected promising to keep the Corn Laws. That's a massive turnaround.
Well, initially, the League didn't seem to make much progress with him. He only made small changes to the duties. But sometime between 42 and 45, even before the famine really hit, Peel privately became convinced. He started to think the Corn Laws weren't actually needed. that British farmers could compete.
Was it the League's arguments?
They were definitely influential. There's that famous story after a brilliant speech by Cobden in March 45. Peel supposedly turned to a colleague and whispered, "You must answer this, for I cannot." Shows his thinking was shifting.
But the political problem remained. His party.
Exactly. Huge dilemma. His MPs, his supporters, expected him to defend the Corn Laws. He hoped, maybe, to gently prepare them for change, then fight an election on it.
But the Irish famine changed everything. Summer of 1845.
It forced his hand. Widespread starvation. Peel imported some maize from America, but he realized pretty quickly that only full repeal of the Corn Laws could bring in enough cheap food fast enough.
So the famine was the catalyst.
Whether it was genuine conviction or a convenient emergency excuse, historians still debate that, but he told his cabinet in November 45, the Corn Laws have to go, now.
And they didn't agree.
A majority opposed him, so he resigned.
But then the Whig leader, Russell, couldn't form a government, and the Queen called Peel back.
That's right. Back in office, he introduced the Repeal Bill, phasing out the Corn Laws over 3 years. And then, all hell broke loose in Parliament.
The Tory revolt.
Massive revolt. 5 months of furious debate. But 2/3 of his own Conservative MPs, led by Benjamin Disraeli and Lord George Bentinck, turned against him, accused him of betrayal, just like over Catholic emancipation years before.
Must have been incredibly bitter. How did the bill even pass?
Only with Whig support. Just 112 Conservatives voted with Peel, 231 voted against him. It passed the Commons in May 1846. Then it went to the Lords.
Where the landowners were even stronger.
Yes, but the Duke of Wellington, despite his own doubts, used his huge influence. Basically told the Lords that having a stable government was more important than the Corn Laws. He got it through.
And then, the revenge of the rebels.
Swift and brutal. The very same night the Repeal Bill passed the Lords, Disraeli and the protectionist Tories joined with the Whigs and Irish MPs to vote down a different government bill, a coercion bill for Ireland.
Just to bring Peel down.
Exactly. Peel resigned immediately, never held office again.
Wow. So, after all that drama, what actually happened when the Corn Laws were repealed? Did bread prices plummet? Did farming collapse?
It's strange, really, kind of an anticlimax. Wheat prices didn't fall dramatically straight away, partly because European harvests were poor too. British farmers actually adapted, innovated, did quite well until the 1870s.
And Ireland? Did it stop the famine?
Tragically, no. Repeal made little difference to the famine itself. It continued until 1848. Over 1 million died. Another 1 million emigrated. Just horrific.
So the biggest effect of repeal wasn't economic, but political.
You could say that. It did encourage other countries to lower their tariffs eventually. But its most immediate, profound effect, it destroyed Peel and split his party right down the middle. That was the lasting damage.
Which brings us right back to that central question. Robert Peel, great statesman who reshaped Britain, or the man who destroyed his own party. Now, the dictionary definition of statesman is pretty broad. Prominent part in managing state affairs. He clearly fits that. But how great was he?
Views vary wildly, which is what makes him so fascinating. You have critics like Walter Bagehot writing in 1856 saying, yes, great administrator, but not really an original thinker, always borrowing ideas, opposing things like Catholic emancipation and Corn Law repeal, only to end up passing them himself.
G. Kitson Clark also mentioned a lack of vision. Some recent historians say his political judgment wasn't always sound, didn't grasp how important party loyalty was becoming.
That's one line of argument. Brilliant implementer, maybe not a visionary originator. But then you look at his actual career.
It's packed with achievements. Ireland Home Secretary reforms, and his time as Prime Minister.
Exactly. Norman Gash gives that powerful summary. Financial stability, trade revived, Chartism calmed, O'Connell checked, state institutions secured, good foreign relations. Gash calls him more than any other one man, the architect of the early Victorian age. That's a huge claim.
It is, but how do you square that circle? The architect of the age who simultaneously wrecked his own party.
Peel's own answer was pretty blunt.
Yep.
The national interest was simply more important than the party. He got utterly fed up with his party over the Corn Laws. He actually wrote, "Thank God I'm relieved forever from the trammels of such a party."
Wow. Trammels of such a party? He felt liberated.
It certainly sounds like it. His biographer, Douglas Hurd, takes a positive view, argues Peel brought this progressive attitude to protect institutions by adapting them. Hurd says Peel defined the new conservative appeal as selective and constructive opposition and the gradual enlisting of sober men of property.
So from that perspective, the betrayal over the Corn Laws wasn't a betrayal at all.
Well, you have to remember the context. The role of political parties was still evolving. Was the PM's first duty to the monarch who recalled him, or to the party rank and file? Peel clearly decided his duty was to the nation. By taking the hit himself, acting in this noble and self-sacrificing way, rather than letting the Whigs repeal the Corn Laws.
He rose above party.
Arguably, yes.
Yes!
And it made him incredibly popular with ordinary people, the man who brought them cheap bread. It's a fascinating case of principle over party, maybe.
What about his wider impact? Beyond Britain.
Douglas Hurd suggests his biggest legacy might even be global. Championing free trade, urging Britain to advance, not recede, setting an example for others. And, yes, Disraeli rebuilt the Conservatives later, but it was on the foundations Peel had laid.
How was he seen right after his death in 1850? Did people appreciate this complexity then?
It's interesting. A lot of politicians found him, well, a bit dull, cold maybe. O'Connell had that famous cutting remark about his smile being like the gleam of the silver plate on a coffin lid.
Ouch.
Yeah. But the public reaction was very different. Widespread grief. Shops closed, factories shut down. In his hometown, Bury, ordinary people raised over £3,000 for his memorial. Lord Aberdeen spoke of universal grief, saying his services were equally rendered to all. Shows a real disconnect between the political bubble and the public feeling.
So wrapping this up, where do we land on Robert Peel's legacy? Great statesman who transformed Britain's economy and politics? Or the leader whose principles ultimately tore his own party apart?
The evidence really does point both ways, doesn't it? His reforms, especially the economic ones, undeniably set the stage for Victorian prosperity, modernized key institutions. You can strongly argue that was for the good of the whole nation. But at the same time, his handling of the Corn Laws absolutely fractured the Conservatives, condemning them to years out of power.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Where is that line between a leader's duty to the national interest and their loyalty to their party? Can devotion to one just destroy the other? And can a party ever fully heal from that kind of deep, principled split?
Those are the big questions, aren't they? Looking at Peel really highlights how complex, how fraught with contradictions political leadership can be.
So, as you think about Peel's legacy, here's something to consider. If a political leader genuinely believes a policy is vital for the nation, even if it costs them their party, their career, does that make them a tragic figure, a hero? Or maybe just someone caught up in the inevitable tides of political change?